disappointed in the way things are going. Voila. So it's obviously been another week of tremendous amount of things taking place, to the extent that no one really knows how to interpret a lot of it at this point. Uh, Obviously, the biggest event was the killing of Sinwar last last Thursday. It was one of those few good moments that we've had during this war. Interestingly, it took place, I won't say by accident, it wasn't totally by accident because they were looking for him and other people in the area, but it wasn't a big commando raid. It wasn't a targeted killing by the Air Force. It was literally a group of ground troops that came upon what they thought were three Hamas fighters, engaged them, and one of them ended up being Sinwar, and he was obviously killed. Of course, that day, as I wrote in that day, it was all good news until later in the evening. The news came that 5 soldiers had died in fighting in Lebanon. So that took away a lot of the happiness of the day, at least partially. And of course, the big question that remains is what is the effect of the killing going to be on the situation in Gaza and the overall war? We still don't even know what the effect of the killing of Nasrallah, which took place now a few weeks ago, is going to be, and how that's going to end as a result. But let's look at this first and foremost. Sinwar was sui generis in the sense that he can't be easily replaced. He's just not another leader that can easily be replaced. Certainly in normal times, yes, he could have been replaced by somebody else. But this isn't normal times for Hamas. Most of the people who would be leading from below him have been killed already. The only person left is really his brother. His brother is supposed to be just as mean and terrible as he is, but doesn't have his charisma and doesn't have his following. And so it's not at all sure whether he can replace him in any which way. And of course, the biggest difference in some ways is the fact that to end the war, the big question is how do we end it? What does it mean to end it? And I'll get into that in a minute. But one of the fears in Israel was we'll end the war under the terms that will bring about a ceasefire. He will emerge from his tunnel. He will emerge unscathed and be able to say, I won. I survived the 1 year attack of the Israel Defense Forces, everything they threw at me. Here I am. I'm still here and I'm still in charge. He's not going to be in charge and he won't be here when that day finally comes. So that's not a small thing. Of course, it's taken us a year. Now, on one level, we could say, well, it took the United States more than 1 year, to say the least, to get bin Laden. On the other hand, it's hard to compare getting someone in Gaza, where we have had tens of thousands of troops on and off for the last year, to bin Laden, who is hiding in the far corners of Pakistan. So, they make the comparisons, and it's fair on one level. Sinwar is to us as the way bin Laden was to the United States. That part is true, but getting him shouldn't be as difficult as it was getting bin Laden, and it wasn't at the end, obviously. Obviously, it was always said that he would make some mistake, that he had to come up for air. No one can stay in the tunnels forever. And that's exactly what happened. He was pushed out. There were various reports. I didn't write about it because it's still not, I mentioned it
Don't
briefly.
have a picture and I can't seem to get it, so.
I wish I could hear you. Yeah.
But there were reports, not totally confirmed, but that the hostages that were with him were the 6 who were killed it was about a month ago. And those 6 were his human shields. They were either become too weak to follow him and too weak to continue, so they left him behind, or just he had to leave the hiding place because the IDF troops were moving forward towards that hiding place. We don't really know. Maybe probably will never know the sequence of events that took place. But in any event, it looks like he was trying to go make his way to the Mawasi, the humanitarian area in Rafah, and he didn't make it, obviously. It's like I said, we know what won't be. We won't see that image of him emerging from the tunnels at the end of the war and showing that he survived, he won. What will we see? And we just don't know. What we haven't seen in the 3 days that have taken place since then is anyone giving up their hostages. Like Netanyahu spoke about, give up your hostages, we'll give you safe passage. As a matter of fact, the founder of SodaStream offered $100,000 to anyone who gives up their hostages. This was tried at the beginning of the war. I don't know if you remember, there was an American philanthropist who offered, I think it was almost $1 million for giving up any hostages. No one took him up on the offer. So the question is, will anyone take them up now? It'll be a question between ideology and fear. And it's not clear, but which will motivate people more, or if, it's even doable. And of course, what we don't know again is how many of the hostages are actually alive. We have no idea at this point. So does this provide new opportunities? I think it clearly does. Today, the head of the Shin Bet has gone to Egypt and met with the head of the Egyptian intelligence services to try to come up with some sort of ideas of what could be done to get some sort of hostage deal moving. The Egyptians believe that it's possible to get a better deal now that Sinwar is not standing in the way. It makes sense on one level. On the other level, if we look back historically, a new leader isn't going to want to be even more flexible than the old leader. So that's a problem in terms of who's going to take over, if someone's going to take over. And then the other question is there someone who's really going to take over at this point? Or will it be various people in different parts of Gaza that are going to be in control? And then the question of negotiating with separate people, is it possible? These are all complicated things. It's better that he's gone, but it doesn't make things necessarily easy, let's put it that way. And it can complicate how we can negotiate any sort of deal. And then, of course, we get back to our side, what it is we're willing to do in terms of a deal. I believe that Netanyahu at this point probably wants to make a deal, is probably even willing to risk Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. I don't know that for sure, but my guess is he's willing to risk that at this point, believing that if the worst case happens and he has to go to elections, that maybe he could pull off another rabbit now after, if he gets the hostages back, killing Nasrallah, killing all of the deaf and everybody else in Sinwar and everyone else, that his popularity will go up. We didn't see it until now. The last poll, which came out a couple of days before the killing of Sinwar, did not show any real growth in Netanyahu's popularity. A little bit, but it came at the expense of Ben-Gvir. So it didn't really change the balance between the two groups, between, if you want to call it right and left, although I don't really call it right and left anymore because I don't think there is a left per se, but between the two dominant blocks in Israeli politics at the moment, to better or for worse. So we'll have to see at this point. I think he would like to go down at this point, not in terms of history as the person who lost all the hostages, but who at least was able to save more of the hostages at this point. Will that overcome some of the opposition? I don't know. And again, we don't have Sinwar to worry about at the moment, but we do have others, and we don't really know what they are thinking, what their beliefs are. Look, there's an underlying problem that people sort of understand in the West, or at least some people do, and some people don't. As long as Hamas is a major player in Palestinian politics, and more than politics and governing, there is no chance of reaching either a short-term, medium-term, or long-term peace with the Palestinians, whatever that means. It's Hamas more than anybody else. I've said this many times, that derailed any attempt at reaching a peace. It's Hamas that brought Netanyahu to power when they did bombing before the elections between Peres and Netanyahu. It's Hamas who convinced Israelis that making peace makes no sense. both by being the leaders of the Second Intifada, and it's Hamas who certainly, after October 6th, after October 7th, I should say, convinced most Israelis that making peace is going to be almost impossible. And so therein lies the problem. The people in the West and America and everyone talks, Palestinian rights and self-determination and all those nice things, which in theory I agree with. But between theory and reality is two different matters. And it's going to be very hard to convince the Israeli public at this point to take more risks for peace, so to speak. I think everyone knows that the direction we're going in brings no solutions. But on the other hand, there's no sense that taking risks makes any sense either. And therein lies, impossible situation. I don't see, the quote unquote, the left in Israel is not selling peace at the moment. It's selling some sort of disengagement, which of course makes the most sense, but it's very hard to bring that into a reality. And so we're sort of stuck in this reality. I'll get back to the Palestinians in a minute, but it's time to let's look a little bit at what's going on in Lebanon. Today was another day of relatively heavy fire in the northern part of Israel. The confrontation line, towns like Shlomi received a lot of rockets today. Homes were hit directly. Luckily, almost all the people have left that area, but also the area further south, the area below the 5-kilometer zone, which is where it was evacuated, also received at least 4 or 5 different barrages today. Haifa received 4 different barrages today. Many of them were just 1 or 2 rockets. And of course, 1 or 2 rockets are going to be intercepted without a problem by Iron Dome, but it brings everyone into the bomb shelters. So 4 times, I think even 5 times today so far, people who live in Haifa have been running to the bomb shelters. Doesn't allow for continuous work or life in any which way.
Wow.
It's been a few days since there have been any attacks on Tel Aviv. Clearly, their capabilities of long-range rockets have been severely degraded. Let's put it that way. Maybe degraded to not to zero, but pretty close to zero. Because I do not believe that if they had the ability to send significant rockets to Tel Aviv, they wouldn't. We are still bombing the Dachia in Beirut. We stopped for a couple of days, but we resumed once on Thursday, and we resumed again today. So I see no reason why they wouldn't be attacking Tel Aviv if they could. But clearly they're limited in what they can do. I'm sure they have rockets, but I'm not sure they have launchers to launch those rockets. Or if they have enough that they may have a few left, but they may not want to endanger their last launchers. The Iranians may also be trying to convince them not to use it. Now, there are reports today that people who are in charge are literally the Iranians at this point. The Iranians sent people from the Quds Force to Beirut because there was nothing left of the Hezbollah leadership to try to be some form of leadership for Hezbollah in terms of what they're doing at this point. Yesterday, we saw the drone attack on Netanyahu's home. No one's willing to quite say that it was 100% successful. All I can say is that the head of the tax authority, and under the tax authority is the department that takes care of paying back people whose homes have been hurt by enemy action. The head of the tax department and the head of Netanyahu's office met at his house today to go over something, and I assume that something is, of course, how much it's going to cost to fix up his home. I'm sure they'll throw in all the things that Netanyahu was trying to get the government to pay for and the government wouldn't agree to pay for recently. So that was it's a significant success on the part of Hezbollah to get a drone all the way down to Caesarea. It's about 70 kilometers from the border, and hit a very specific target. Very, very similar to what they had done last week when they hit the Golani base. And they did it the same sort of way. They fired 3 drones, and in the meantime, a series of rocket attacks. and Israel managed to down 2 of the drones, and the third drone got through. Here's this terrible thing they did. They've ratcheted things up by attacking our prime minister. The problem is they got through. I'm not sure why we're surprised that they attacked our prime minister. We obviously killed Nasrallah, who, as far as they're concerned, was their leader. So I don't consider this a ratcheting up. I think it's a bad thing that they got through, but we could have expected that they're going to try to do this or similar things, considering what we've done successfully over the last month or so. So the question is that going to affect our plans vis-a-vis Iran? And our plans vis-a-vis Iran, we all go to sleep every night wondering, is this going to be the night we're going to attack Iran, and will let tomorrow be the night they respond? And every night comes and goes and nothing happens. President Biden was asked, I think it was 2 days ago, does he know what the plan is, and does he know when it'll be? And then he said, can you share it with me? Share it with us. And of course, he's answered yes, yes, no, no. In other words, he knows what the plan is. He knows when it's going to be theoretically, and of course, he's not going to share it with the colonists who are asking him the question. So obviously, there's a set plan, unless it's been changed. Obviously, I'm not quite clear to me what we're waiting for. Maybe we're waiting for after Sukkot. At this point, we're going to be a week and a half before the elections. It probably should wait for after the American election, so as not to be thought of interfering on one side or another, although I don't really see how an attack on Iran at this point will affect either side of the election. But okay, that is at least a thought that we should wait until after the election. We don't have to wait to know after we know who wins. We can do it, after the last polls close or something like that. But leave that part aside. It has been a while, and that worries me because much of the world will wonder, why are we suddenly attacking Iran? We'll forget the fact that it was only 2 weeks ago they sent almost 200 ballistic missiles attacking Israel. But time passes. In America, you've had 2 hurricanes since then, a busy election campaign, all sorts of events taking place in other parts of the world. So who's going to remember the fact that 2 weeks ago, Iran attacked Israel more or less for no good reason? More or less. They had some reasons, but nothing that would justify such an attack. So, at this point, I'm just hoping it's been thought out carefully, what the different options are. I will not even hazard a guess what of the different options the Israeli government has decided to do. At least I can say one thing: they didn't make the decision quickly. Now, of course, Netanyahu is not known for making quick decisions, but in this case, it's good that at least the different options were discussed, and it's a thoughtful decision, I hope, amongst everybody to decide what it is we're going to do and how we're going to do it. From what I understand, the THAAD system has been deployed at this point. The THAAD adds a significant amount of firepower in terms of interception. The THAAD battalion can intercept 48 targets simultaneously. So if you figure if the total number of ballistic missiles that Iran fired last time was 200, it means that 50% of them, theoretically, although I think even a few of the 200 were intercepted by American naval ships on the way. But beyond that, that means almost 25% can be intercepted by the THAAD, which decreases the need of the Arrow to intercept all of them. The THAAD has not been as well tested in battle yet as the Arrow. Hopefully it's as successful as the Arrow, but it's much more expensive. THAAD missile costs somewhere in the area of $14 million a piece. On the other hand, the Arrow cost $1 million a piece, which seems a ridiculous difference in price. And I can't really explain the difference in price, other than the fact that American aerospace companies make a lot of money.
$14 million for a missile.
So that's really a big difference in the cost of doing it. But Obviously, cost of a missile hitting a building in Tel Aviv would be much more than $14 million. So, anyway, so the FAT is ready for defense in Part B. Clearly, Biden and Netanyahu have agreed on the parameters of the response. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent the FAD. And that's where we stand right now with the Iranian attack. It will come one of these days, either maybe right after Sukkot, or maybe at that point they'll wait until after the American elections. Going back to Gaza. So I want to go back to two things about Gaza. First of all, the letter from last week that was sent talking about the various things that Israel is not doing in terms of humanitarian aid and the fact that less goods have been going into Gaza. The letter was again a response to the Leahy Act and the requirements that aid is distributed. Also, I don't think the Americans were particularly happy with the general's plan, as it's called, and which I explained at some point, which was the idea of forcing all the Gazans out of northern Gaza, cleaning it out completely of Hamas, and then keeping it clear. The U.S. has always been opposed to that in the sense of clearing areas completely of people. We're doing it anyway, it seems, in northern Gaza, convincing people to leave Jabalia refugee camp. We're going part by part, and we have complete division in the area. And they've been working for a while. And this is an area we've been through twice, which talks about the futility of military operations without a political plan. And that's inherently where it stands at the moment. We have, we keep on doing military operations, but it's not clear what the political goals are and how we're going to implement them. There is talk, and it's serious talk, of an idea of American contract workers. Some of the American, we'll call them mercenaries for the moment. There's a bunch of different American companies that specialize in semi-warfare that are used by the US in Iraq and in Afghanistan. Anyway, there's one of them they've been talking to about using them to set up humanitarian bubbles in different parts of Gaza, starting in the north. When I say humanitarian bubble, in other words, setting aside a certain area, and in that area they will distribute food and medicine and water and everything else. They will only allow people in who are not armed, and they themselves will be responsible for maintaining the perimeter of this area. I understand Israel is looking upon this positively, and supposedly the US is also positive about this plan. It will provide a solution to the humanitarian issues in terms of the amount of food. Part of the biggest problem is that the food is getting in, but then is being stolen by Hamas, both literally stolen and not being delivered, and plus being stolen and then resold at very high prices by Hamas. It's the way Hamas makes money. The question is, if there are other armed people giving it out, then if there are armed people who are better armed and better equipped than the people who are left in Hamas, then it might work. These people are willing to risk their lives like that. They get paid very, very well. So we'll have to see. That's clearly one option at this point. We need to find some sort of solution. It's more and more difficult to come up with a solution at this point because there is no clear way of distributing the food that's not taken by Hamas unless we do it ourselves, and we don't want to do it ourselves for a lot of reasons, including getting involved with the population, including the fact that you slowly start doing that, and before long you're totally occupying Gaza. And be quite honest, we don't have the troops to do it. We're pretty much the troops are at their end of who can do. Some of the troops now in Lebanon, they're on the 3rd and 4th reserve call-up. The regular army troops have basically been fighting nonstop for a year. These are things that Israel is not used to doing. Hasn't happened before for such long periods of time. And so putting more additional responsibilities is problematic. I do have to say that the troops in Lebanon seem to be doing a good job. They have not had the difficulties that we had in 2006. In the history section, I'll slowly talking about 2006 over the next 3 or 4 days. And we did not do well in 2006. The troops were not prepared. They were not trained. We did not prepare the ground for the assault. It's the exact opposite this time. The troops are well trained, well experienced. They've been fighting for a long time. The units know what they're doing. And number two, after a year of pounding the locations that Hezbollah had in the south, it's been relatively easy. What's taken so long is the fact that we're literally taking apart these very, very large structures that Hezbollah has created, these tunnel systems, which are different than the tunnel systems in Gaza, in the sense they're not used to go between villages and towns. They're merely used as bunker systems to fight from, to stay and hide from, but they're very, very extensive, and it takes quite an effort, and they're all done in stone. And so they're chiseled, blown out of stone, and to blow them up is a very, very complicated engineering problem, which is being addressed slowly but surely to do that. Also, one of the interesting things is the weapons that are being captured in South Lebanon are brand new factory-made, weapons, mostly coming from Russia via Iran, from other sources, as opposed to Gaza, where the weapons mostly were locally made, put together weapons. They worked, they sometimes worked, they didn't always work. Hezbollah's weapons are brand new, quote unquote, I won't say state of the art, but new and much better than what Hamas has to fight with. And they're also the Hezbollah fighters. When they do decide to fight, they do fight to the end. But they don't end up, they cause us casualties, but they don't win any firefight, obviously. They don't have our tech, and they don't have the training that our troops do. But sometimes it's costly. 2 words on Jordan and the West Bank. So Jordan, I wrote about last night about the terror attack that came in from Jordan. There is growing concern of the attempt of Iran to influence Jordan, of trying to overthrow quietly the Hashemite kingdom. It's a real concern. We need to be aware of it. Obviously, it's our longest border, and despite the ups and downs of our relationship, it's in many ways our friendliest border. And at the moment, we don't even have a fence along parts of the border. So it's something to be worried about. There is talk about putting a fence, but it'll take time, it'll be expensive. We have a lot of expensive needs going forward, so it's not clear what level of priority that's going to be. In the West Bank, there clearly some, terror comes up and goes. We've been very, very active trying to nip it in the buds. Constant activity inside the West Bank, arresting people based mostly on intelligence, and basically as much as possible catching terrorists before they can set out. We did have the case a couple of days ago where it was a ring that we took down, the ones who were responsible for the bomb that had gone off too early in Tel Aviv, killing only the bomber. But the concern is there are more of them. Also, I've written recently about the Iranian spies, which is a pretty frightening thing in the sense that regular Israelis have been willing to work for money, spying for the Iranians, not only spying, but willing to kill people or attack targets for money from the Iranians. That surprised me, to be quite honest with you. I mean, one of them was a criminal, but still, I'm really surprised that, these are not Arab Israelis. These were Jewish Israelis who were willing to do this for money. Very, but I guess there were capos in the Holocaust too, so shouldn't be totally surprised. Anyway, I think I'll bring this to a close and open for questions. Raise your hand, and hopefully I'll see you. If not, my wife will see you and yell to me to call on you. So. Okay, so so Mark Spires first.
Yeah, shalom from Montreal. Why are the drones getting through? The Iron Dome system is much more effective toward the other missiles, but the drones seem to be coming through.
Okay, So there are two parts to the answer to the question. About 20% of the drones are getting through, which is worse than the Iron Dome is about 90% on missiles. Two reasons or three reasons for it. Number one, missiles or rockets, I should say, have a elliptical orbit. You're able to see them going up and you're able to track them going down. The Iron Dome radar was designed for that purpose, and therefore it can calculate its exact path from the moment it starts going up in its trajectory. Iron Dome knows where it's going to land and where it's going to calculate where it's going to be at any given point and calculates the interception path. I mean, obviously, this is all done quickly by a computer, but it's all capable to be done because it's a rocket that has a fixed trajectory. So that makes it an easier target to intercept. Number two, the rockets are larger, and it's a larger target. And it's a target that has a radar, that you can see it on radar. So that's number two. And number three, it's sort of related to the first one. The drones fly close to the ground. They fly sometimes over water where they get lost in what's called, the clutter. Ground clutter is what it's called. So it's very hard to follow them on radar. And they're very small. And so it's very hard to get a good target on them. Israel did not prepare properly for the possibility of drones. There are a lot of Israeli companies with all sorts of ideas. Israel's been selling has been selling projects overseas for quite a number of years to protect airfields and particular installations. Israel didn't really plan in that way, and one of the problems with our way we're addressing the drone problem is that we're not protecting targets, we're protecting the border. So what do I mean by that? Once the drone had gotten past the border and it evaded the radar, there was nothing, for the sake of argument, if there was a guard on the top of the house of Netanyahu the other day, there's nothing he can do to take it down. On the other hand, if we had a defensive method, whether it be a Vulcan machine gun or whether it be an electronic system at his house, we could have stopped it from attacking. But we didn't set up defenses in the same way on the Golani base. We didn't set up, we don't have someone standing guard looking in the old way of, searching the air like they had to do during World War II, search for planes. Think about the pictures, iconic pictures from the Battle of Britain, where you have people on top of buildings with their binoculars looking for German planes coming. At some levels, we need that to some extent. On some levels, part of the problem is the tech. We have a high-tech solution, which is a interceptor rocket against a relatively low-tech device. If I wrote to someone, if we had World War II fighters, that would be great. They would do great against the drones. They fly faster than drones, but they fly slow. They have machine guns to knock them down, but we don't. So we have very fast fighter jets that easily overshoot, and but the intercept missiles that we use sometimes miss, sometimes cause damage themselves, which is another problem. If they miss, and especially when you're going at a target that's very low, it's very hard for, if you miss the target, it's going to hit the ground and it itself is going to cause damage. So those are all the reasons why it's difficult. They do have success at about 80%. And keep in mind, when the Iranians fired their drones from Iran, between the United States and our Air Force and the British Air Force and the French Air Force and probably the Jordanian Air Force and one or two other air forces, we downed all of them before they got here. But that was enough time, and it was traveling long distance, and we were able to get them all. So that's the reason.
I have a follow-up question, if you permit me.
Sure, go ahead.
North Korea has produced drones that Russia is using in the war against Ukraine. Is there any evidence with the axis of evil that Hezbollah and Iran is getting North Korean drones?
Well, Iran produces drones, and Russia is getting drones from Iran. So I don't know that the North Korean drones are any better than the Iranian drones, but Iran produces a lot of drones, and they've been selling them or giving them to Hezbollah, and they've been selling them to the Russians. So I don't know why they're getting North Korean versus versus Iranian drones. But yes, the axis of evil is against us too, and we haven't really understood the fact that we haven't made a full commitment to the right side in that, but that's a whole other story. Okay,
תודה רבה.
okay, Michael. I don't know which Michael, but
Yeah,
Mike.
thank you. Thank you, Mark. So I've been reading about diplomatic overtures or kind of footsie between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, Saudi Arabia always tries to do, a little bit of diplomacy, and certainly the Iranians are trying to do some diplomacy. The Saudis have been very happy to see Hezbollah knock down two pegs. There's no question in my mind that after this is all over, if we have some decent diplomacy on our part, we can finally reach that deal with Saudi Arabia. They're not really interested to deal with Iran. Iran is their enemy and will continue to be their enemy, I think, for the foreseeable future. Remember the fact that the Houthis are impeding some of their shipping as well. So, the Saudis will always try some diplomacy. But the reality is they're hoping for our victory more than almost anybody else. And the things that we accomplished in the last couple of weeks, we've regained once again where their apple in their eye, so to speak, as someone who's powerful and who they want to be friends with. But we'll have to see.
Okay, thank you.
Mick.
Hey, yeah, hey, Mark, sir. Hey, when we met in Israel in April when I was there, you had mentioned one of your rare things of optimism was that Israel could eventually develop some type of laser system that would make it more impenetrable. Can you give an update on kind of where the laser tech?
Yes. So I've heard two.
Now?
I've heard two stories in the last week. One of it said that we're 2 to 3 months away from it being operational, and one of it saying it's going to be another 6 to 8 months. So I don't have the answer to that question. I'm going to go with the 2 to 3 months only in the sense that, the last real briefing I had on that was from one of the companies that are making it, and that was probably last April. And so it's been a lot of months since April. And, in the same way that the Israel Aircraft Industries and Rafael have been turning out missiles 24/7, I have to assume that the scientists and engineers who are designing the laser system are also working 24/7 to try to turn it into a reality. So I think part of the question, what I understood from them, is they were trying to get it to be light enough to be airborne. I think for it to be ground-based, it can be fairly soon. And maybe what I'm hearing is the difference between 2 to 3 months to having ground-based systems and 6 to 8 months until we have the air-based systems. Air-based systems have 3 to 4 times the range or power, that's sort of interchangeable in a way, as the ground-based has to do with physics and atmosphere and things that I don't fully understand, but I can sort of guess what they may be. So I think that's where we stand. Keep in mind the fact that one big negative is the lasers are really great in the summer. They'll be less effective in the winter. Winter isn't that long here, but there is winter coming of greater or lesser extent. Lasers don't do that well in rain and fog and other situations. They do very well in sunny, what looks like in my background right now. Lasers are very effective.
But if they are successful, is it a game changer? What are the tactical and strategic implications if they get this operating?
Okay. Again, it divides between two different views on it. It's a game changer on one level, certainly financially. Let's start with that. An interception by Iron Dome costs probably $10,000 at the moment. It may be going down. One of the things that someone who worked for Rafael said recently is the cost of each individual rocket has gone down in the last year because they're making so many of them. So, like anything else, you make many, you buy components at a better price, you produce them more efficiently, and your price goes down. But still, let's just assume it's $10,000 per interceptor. The cost of a laser interceptor is like $5, an electricity cost, basically. So that makes a big difference on that level. They'll be more effective against the drones, because some of the things that I mentioned in terms of the drones won't exist. And you don't have to worry about, one of the big problems we're having right now is we've had some casualties, not from the actual rockets, but from the interceptors or parts of the interceptors when they fall. The person who was killed yesterday in Akko may have been killed by parts of the interceptor. I'm saying this maybe because I heard two different accounts, and I didn't want to write it because I don't know for sure which one is correct, but it may have been, and we've certainly had cases before where people have been hurt from parts of the interceptor. You won't have that with the laser. Now, I've also heard about, once they become airborne, being able to use them in an offensive capability. And of course, the ability of using a laser in an offensive capability allows you to use a laser with almost no collateral damage whatsoever if you're aiming at some group of people or some person or some target, as opposed to a bomb, which in order to get that person or that target, you have to blow up a certain area. A laser, you can just take out the person or take out the particular target. So that has all sorts of implications. But again, I'm not sure when the offensive laser is going to be ready. Probably pretty much when the defensive one is as well, that's airborne, because in order to be an offensive weapon, it has to be airborne. So that's where we stand. Ian.
Mark, a technical question which you may or may not be able to answer. Obviously, with Israel scrambling GPS, the drones are not using GPS, and they must be using inertial guidance mechanisms, which are extremely sophisticated to have the level of precision. They have to hit a target that's tens of kilometers away with the precision that they can hit a dining hall or a prime minister's residence. And that kind of points to Hezbollah, Iran, et al. Having very, very sophisticated technologies that they're developing for use with drones and other things. Is there any thought about that in terms of their advance in technology? And then
I actually think that their drones have been remotely controlled, the ones that have been so effective. So that doesn't require, that does not require GPS, obviously, or anything more than just a guy with a joystick and a camera. Now, the fact that we haven't been able to jam the signal is a problem, because one of the ways of fighting drones is basically to intercept their signal that's controlling them.
Right.
That I'm not sure why we haven't been able to do that, because that's really one of the more basic electronic warfare means against the drone. But from the best of my knowledge, and it's not, I couldn't confirm it, but I believe these things were remotely controlled, and therefore they don't need any other guidance. I mean, once upon a time, you had the cruise missiles used to be based on a photographic view of, in other words, they would have a path, and they would follow what was programmed into them based on a path that they would see from their camera. But these are not them. I believe strongly that they're being controlled by their operators. And again, we should be able to A, intercept, and B, we should find out where the signal is coming from and take it out. But I'm not in charge, and there'll be facts I don't know, so I won't say for sure. Okay, Jeff, I think. Jeff and Lynn.
Good afternoon. I have an app called Red Alert. I get notifications of the rocket attacks. Is this the same app that Israel is actually using for its citizens?
Okay, no, there's a separate. Okay, a lot of people use Red Alert. I have two different apps I run at the same time, and there's Red Alert, and there's another one that's sent out that's used by the home command. They're basically similar, the same basic. They're just slightly different, and there's no real difference between the two. They both seem pretty accurate. Whenever there's one announcement, the home front command sends out its warning, and it goes to both of the apps.
Okay.
Red Alert, I think, came out, if I'm not mistaken, it came out before the Homefront Commands app came out, but the Red Alert is a commercial app. I'm not sure how they make money, or they make money somehow. And Homefront, of course, is put out, by the government. At this point, there is something new that seems to work, and that started it started before the last Iranian attack. The government now has the ability of sending alerts directly to people's phones without having any app. So if you're in an area that's about to be attacked, you will get a message that'll appear on the front of your screen that'll warn you that you're about to get an attack. It's like the same thing that's used for the Amber Alerts in the United States. It overcomes everything else on your phone, and you get that alert, and it actually worked during the last attack from Iran. We all got notifications that covered our phones, and all over the country they got that. So that eliminates the need for someone to download the app and follow it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, somebody
I
got.
I have a question, if possible. It's Mark Weiersman. In your previous description of a drone attack on Netanyahu's house, are you telling me that security people positioned, if they were on the roof with an RPG, couldn't have shot down that drone?
Okay. I would say, I don't know, an RPG, if they would have had a Vulcan submachine gun, they probably could have shot it down. Vulcan being a very fast firing machine gun. That's how the Ukrainians knocked down most of the drones with machine guns. An RPG, you'd only have one shot, and if you missed, you would miss. If you have a machine gun, you could keep on firing until you hit it. So yes, an RPG could have taken it down if you would have gotten the exact shot, but using an RPG against a moving target is not something, an aerial target, that anyone's been trained in. But if you had a machine gun, especially particular types of very fast machine guns, heavy machine guns, you clearly could have taken it down. The same thing, quite honestly, at the Golani base. The fact that if there was a tower at the Golani base where somebody was scanning the sky for drones, and they had the right machine gun, very high probability, not a guarantee, you could obviously miss, but a high probability they could have knocked down that drone. But we don't have terminal defense here at all. So
why don't we have that? Why doesn't Netanyahu have security around his residences? How come all of this? It's a lack of security. I was there during the Yom Kippur War, by the way, and there was also that security question. It keeps coming up that people seem to be lax in totally being secure.
Okay, let's divide that in two. First of all, I don't think Netanyahu was there. So he is by far the most secured prime minister in Israel's history. By far. I mean, everyone since the Rabin assassination is more secure than previously. There's nothing like open cars or anything else like that used to be in Israel. But Netanyahu particularly is obsessive about his own security, and you can see it by his security personnel. I mean, we had a case a bunch of years ago where he was actually paying a shiva call to someone in our building, and we couldn't go back. We were out for a walk, and we couldn't come back into the building because they wouldn't let us into our own building because Netanyahu was in the building 2 flights above our apartment. So he by far has the most security of anybody. But we don't have the sense, in other words, because we've gone so many years where we didn't worry about aircraft penetrating our borders because our Air Force was 100% successful at taking care of any airplane that came in. Years ago, even when I was in the Army in the mid-70s, units had anti-aircraft guns that went with them, even though by then they were starting to phase it out because we had total control of the sky. But previously you'd have anti-aircraft guns that would go with units in case there was an attack from the air. We've gotten away from that completely. We've left it to the Air Force to make sure that our borders, quote unquote, our air borders are sealed and we can knock down any threat. We've been reasonably successful in terms of missiles and rockets, but the drones provide a hard target and an easy target. I say it's a hard target because the problem is seeing them, finding them. But it's an easy target because, like I said, a machine gun can't knock down a missile or a rocket, but a machine gun can easily knock down one of these drones. We used to have Vulcan anti-aircraft systems as part of the general deployment amongst aircraft guns throughout the Air Force, throughout the country, and the Navy ships all had these guns. We replaced them because of Iron Dome, because we thought Iron Dome would do everything, and we don't need the Vulcans. Sometimes low tech is better than high tech, and relying totally on our high tech sometimes can be a problem, especially.
Well, hence my question again is, why is this hubris of Israeli, don't care. We'll get through this. Why is that hubris evident in the fact that, okay, Netanyahu wasn't in that home at that particular time, but he has several residences in Israel. Why aren't they adequately protected against drones and things like that?
Why isn't every army base radically protected also? I prefer actually have the army bases protected than him personally. I got more targets on the army bases. Look, a lot of things aren't right in this country. Why is it that a year into this war in the north, there's still not significant amount, enough shelters for the people living in the north? They haven't, it's a year already, and they haven't done them. I mean, we've got added a few, but not nearly the number they need. Lots of things don't get done in this country. More of us think that that a government, leaving aside the politics or anything else, is just not really competent. And some parts of the army are unfortunately not as competent as we'd like either. And nothing moves quickly, I'm afraid. We used to be a country, anything that gets large gets bureaucratic. Anything that gets bureaucratic, it takes time to do, time to change, time to do all those sort of things. And at the moment, things don't happen quick enough, I'm afraid. They should. I saw one column today where they said basically, why is the Army or the Air Force only looking at some of the big companies, Elbit and Rafael and whatever, for solutions against the drones? They should be looking at some of the startups, which they should be. There are 500 startups in this country that are working in some form of drones. I assume they're doing some of it at this point, but no one moves fast
Okay,
enough.
one last question, if nobody else has one. Any information?
Has a question. Let Claude speak.
Okay.
Claude?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the message is formed by the messenger. B-2s were deployed the other day to Yemen. Why did we send B-2s? Was that a message to Iran in regards to the next action against Iran by Israel?
I think
would we participate?
Okay, I think it was a message partially. What the U.S. can do. I think it may also have had a tactical goal, and I don't know that we don't know what bombs they used and what they went after in terms of underground munitions. The B-2 can carry much more munitions than anything else can, but it was a message to Iran saying what could happen. I don't think it relates to this attack. I think it relates to the potential attack after this, so to speak. It's telling Iran that if you decide to respond to the Israeli attack, you better respond in a limited sort of way, because the next attack we might participate in.
And part two is, now that they went after the prime minister, can Israel go after Khamenei?
I find this very problematic, frankly. I mean, I've heard this on the Israeli media a lot. First of all, I don't understand why we should be surprised that Hezbollah went after the prime minister. We killed Nasrallah. I mean, as far as they're concerned, we killed their leader. I mean, I'm not saying it's good they went after Netanyahu, but the fact is they went after Netanyahu the same way we went after and we killed Nasrallah. If they might have, God forbid, killed Netanyahu, that might be a whole other story. But they didn't. They hit an empty building. Does that give us, that give us the reason to go after Khamenei? Plus, I don't know that it makes any sense to go after Khamenei. That's not going to bring down the regime. And until now, Khamenei has not reversed his fatwa on not building nuclear weapons. They're close to it, but they're not doing it yet. If we kill him, will the next guy say, look what they did? We got to build a nuclear weapon. So I don't see what the gain is other than, our own pride that we can do it. I think that would be a mistake. And again, I'm not, you know, I'm not surprised they went after Netanyahu. The good thing is they didn't get him and they got an empty building, basically. It shouldn't have succeeded, but they did. So, you know, I don't think anymore. Okay, someone else, the person who was asking the question and has another question, please go ahead with your additional question. And I think then we'll call it a night.
So the question that I have is any further information about the security breakdown on the Gaza Israeli border of October 7th? I heard again Israeli hubris, the same thing that said in the Yom Kippur War of 73. Nah, they're not going to attack. Nah, they don't have the capabilities. And I've heard the same thing happened with some intelligence people that were aware of something going on, but said, nah, they're not going to do it. They don't have the capabilities. So any further information on that front?
Not really, because basically what we need is a national commission of inquiry, and Netanyahu will not allow one to be started. And that's very problematic because we need to have those answers, but we also need to have those answers from a operational standpoint. In other words, there are 2 points in having a commission of inquiry. Number one, it would be useful to know who failed and who didn't, and they all failed basically, and there's no reason why any of these people should still be in office, and there's no reason why any of the generals that were in charge that day should still be generals in charge. But we'll leave that part aside for a second. But I truly believe that no one should be standing. There should be no one who is a member of the government. Should be the next government, and no one who is the general staff should still be in the general staff. But okay, let's put that aside. But leaving that aside, we need to know operationally what needs to be changed. What are the things that will make sure it doesn't happen again? They made a change after Yom Kippur War when there was one lowly, I don't remember, it was a major or whoever he was in the intelligence that was convinced there was going to be a war, and no one listened to him. Now anybody in intelligence, starting from a private on up, if he thinks there's going to be a war, is told he can call the head of intelligence and warn them directly. Well, in this case, it might not have helped anyway. So that was one of the things that came out of Yom Kippur War to not have that happen again. But clearly, there are a lot of operational things that need to be determined. That I get particularly angry at the talk of the budgets that are necessary for the army going forward because of what happened. Well, guess what? Let's first understand better what happened, how it could have been stopped, and then understand what sort of army we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Maybe we don't need an army that's 3 times as large. The army always wants more. I'm sure we need some more, but maybe we don't need quite what they want. Maybe we need something different, or maybe we need robots, or maybe we need, again, I'm not planning for what the army of the future should look like, but I hate the fact that we're making budgetary decisions on the future without understanding what took place and without analyzing what it is we need in order to make sure it never happens again. And that's a deep discussion that requires, some bright people going over the facts, and we don't have it happening at this point at all. And everyone's making a decision. We need more of this. We need more F-35s. We need more, more missiles, more that. Okay, we need more. But do we know exactly what more we need? Do we really need more tanks? Or maybe we do, maybe we don't. What are the things that we need? And we've also had a year of war, and we've learned from that war. Let's look at all of that. Let's look at the picture of what happened before. Let's look at the picture of the decisions that were made when we decided to go to war, how we went to war, why did we start in the north and not start in Rafiach for the sake of argument. All the things that were decided, let someone look at, let's get a report. I don't really, again, the first part of it is that no one should, none of these people should stay in business or in office. Well, that's a political minefield. I believe that strongly, and probably 80% of the country believes that in general, although except for whoever they like. But we'll leave that apart aside. But forget that. The system questions, the questions of what sort of army we need, what sort of systems we need in place, what sort of ready force we need so if we get surprised ever again, there can be 1,000 soldiers at any point, any border within 2 hours. These are the sort of things we need to put in place and know about and plan. And that can only come by looking at what exactly happened and coming forward with recommendations and making plans. But we're now over a year out. Memories are going to become clouded. Information will be harder to come by. People will have died, unfortunately, who could give testimony. And it's a tragedy, the fact that we're not doing it. And we're not doing it because Netanyahu knows at least part of what that report's going to say. And he doesn't want to see that report because that report is clearly, from the political standpoint, going to blame him. But he won't be alone in being blamed, obviously. Okay, everybody.
Stay safe.
Okay, everybody.
Yeah, wow.
Have a
Thank you
great
all.
2 weeks. I
Thank
hope.
you.